Okay, so to make sure that you can work on the project where you want to, where you need to, and that I have more time to give you individualized feedback in groups, we're going to do this project kind of self-paced, but with access to me at any time. And this will allow everyone to move at their own pace, but also get feedback when they would like. So when I click on the link for today in the weekly thing on the homepage, you'll see that there is a link to today's slides. So any hints we give you, you can look at. And as I scroll down, it's going to go in steps with suggested due dates and everything you need for that step. For example, you already did step 1, the secondary research and notes, and the note forms are here, the link is here, and it reminds you what you have to do: find 3 minimum sources, create notes and bullet points and list, and then upload to Canvas here. That's a step that if you haven't uploaded your secondary source notes and sources, you'll want to do that. But that's where we should be at today. From this pace on, you're going to move kind of at your own pace. Step 2 is to write the story or rough draft. Some of you were ready for this on Friday and watched the Nearpod that gave instructions. For each of the next steps, so that it is self-paced, you'll notice that it starts with important links. And we put the slides in because sometimes as a student, I like to refer to the slides after I've watched the Nearpod, but I don't want to have to go back into the Nearpod to see something. So there's a link to the slides. There's a link to the checklist and example that you can look at for writing the story. And then it starts with a Nearpod with instructions. It then has you using Google Docs, write your story alone or with partners, and then share with me when you're finished with your story and upload the rough draft here. You're also going to want to share that rough draft with me on Google Docs, just emphasizing it again, so I can give you comments in the best way. You don't want to send me a PDF because if you have typos or capitalization, it's not an easy fix. It's a little bit harder. So for each step, you'll see those links. You'll see any downloads that you need. You'll see an instruction Nearpod, and then you'll see what you need to do to turn in next. For the next steps, and notice that your writing of the story, our goal is to be done with that by tomorrow so I can get you feedback by Friday. Harshal.
I have a quick question about my secondary sources. So
Yes.
So like for one of my sites, like it's the same site, but there's a video and text in it. So like, but they're kind of like separated. So can I count that as one each or just one in total?
I would say the video is probably a second source because someone's written a script for that and it's usually different. They're usually meant to be complementary, like it's on history.com. They do that a lot.
And like, so I can just say video because the video doesn't really have a link. So can I just say video on the website?
Yeah, when you press play, it usually does. You and I can look at that in a little bit just to make sure. Okay, so now that I've explained how it's organized, I'm just going to go through the steps in brief, but you know everything's there. So when you're done writing the draft, some of you today are going to be doing the Nearpod. Some of you have already done the Nearpod. You're just going to keep going with that step until you're done. And your goal to keep up is by Wednesday, so you get feedback and it's first come, first serve. I will be spending a lot of my free time this week giving you feedback. Step 3, find and use primary sources. Your goal is to do that Thursday. While I'm giving students feedback, because that'll take a while, you'll start to look for those quotes and items to support that. And this will go through that step. Step 4 is to find and use images. You'll go through that. Step 5 is to create your website and structure it the way we need to. Step 6 is to revise your story once you've gotten feedback. You'll notice that steps 3, 4, and 5 all kind of interweave. It'll depend on which story gets done first and what order, but you can keep moving forward. And then step 7, is to finalize the website. And it's got a final checklist and rubric I've added along the way so you can kind of keep up with that as you're going. And then you'll publish your website and upload the link of your URL here. and then add it into Canvas. One note that I want to bring up, because it came up from a different class today, was that remember that has a lot of points. So you need me to read your draft so it's fair, because you get graded on revisions, but also it's fair because it's 30 points. So you have one section on writing the story that's worth 30 points, and you have a writing grade, and that's the content that you use. And then you have a writing grade where you get, based on how well it fits like a story and how well that you've done revisions, you get a score there as well. So that's a hugely important part of your project for you to get feedback on. Your supporting use of quotes and images, that's going to be an additional 30 points. And that's also going to be for each area. It's going to include your use of primary sources in quotes and images, both on your website. And images includes video clips too. And then finally, we have that writing the story that we talked about. So altogether, you're looking at about 90 additional points. And remember, I just grabbed 20 points here for the secondary sources and notes. When you balance it out with the length and time we spent on other projects, it's a fair amount. It's meant to balance out percentages so that it's fair, but don't think it's only 10 points for each step. You don't want to skip turning in your drive. Now that we've looked at that, I have one main tip to look at in today's slides, and away we go. So basically, today then, if you haven't, don't forget to turn in your secondary sources and notes because they are worth 20 points. And I'm going to be looking at those tonight and ongoing. Do them now if you haven't done that already so that we can look at those and give you a good score, I hope. Then it's all about working. If you want to work in a breakout room with your group, you can come to the hub, or if you want feedback from me, you can come to the hub as well. Okay, otherwise, we're working on our project, doing the same learning targets we talked about on Friday, going through those same steps. And right now, everybody is kind of on step 2 and maybe 3, depending on where we're at. So follow the guidelines for that. And again, that's on Canvas, same thing. Some reminders while you're writing today. Don't forget to use your own words. I've had to tell a few kids, hey, this doesn't sound like you. It sounds like a bunch of bullet points that you've literally taken from sites. I know that some of us do that when we're taking notes today. Make sure it's in your own words. I am looking for a 7th grader telling the story, and you're pretty smart, so they'll be pretty good. So just make sure it's in your own words. Don't forget to break up your story into paragraphs. Nobody wants to read 150 or 200 words in a row without a break of images, quotes, or text. You don't really like that, so it's the same thing in your own writing. So be sure to break it up into paragraphs. Cause and effects, probably 2 or 3, and it comes up naturally, and maybe 3 or 4 for description. Use transitions between paragraphs and pages. One of the best things I can tell you is to end your causes section with a sentence that refers to what's going to happen on the next page with causes. For example, if I just talked about the civil rights movement fighting segregation, my last sentence that hints about the March on Washington might be something like, now that the Civil Rights Act was proposed, Martin Luther King and other leaders decided that they needed to support passage of the act by holding a march on Washington. That tells me that the next section on description is going to be about the March on Washington and gives that story feel. So the last sentence on each page should refer to the next one coming up. That's the best way to do a transition. Don't forget to share over Google Docs and upload the link in Canvas. This will just safeguard us because kids seem to forget one or the other in distance, and I want to make sure that I have it. If you don't share it with me though, and you give me a link, I can't see it. That happens a lot. So make sure you share it with me. This is crucial in this project. And one final tip, to begin your story seems to be a hard part for some kids, or to get that story flow. And one of the things you can do is begin the story with a once upon a time, which in history is a date, to help make it feel better. So a date or an era. Here's an example from ours at the beginning of causes. After the Civil War ended in 1865, slavery was finally abolished and citizenship and voting rights for Black Americans were granted. Notice how this beginning part has the time frame after the Civil War and a date. It just sounds more like a story. Using that and that end of each page to go to the next one will help it feel like a story and move you more towards a 10. Here's an example at the beginning of description. The March on Washington took place on August 28, 1963. Again, that kind of dives us into that next section, and that date makes us kind of follow, oh, here's what's going to happen and what we're going to learn about. Okay, so now for the next 2